Hello, welcome to the channel. Subscribe, leave a like, and don't forget to write a comment. Enjoy watching.
I should have burned the envelope the second I saw Aunt Carol's handwriting, that practice cursive she uses for birthday cards, condolence notes, and every other occasion where she wants to appear like she gives a damn. It came on thick cardstock, too, autumn leaves printed around the edges like a goddamn Hallmark ad, trying too hard to look warm when all it did was feel cold. We would love to see you this year, Maggie. It's been too long. No apology. No explanation. Just an assumption that I'd be the one to fold, like always. And somehow I did. It's been 5 years since I sat at that table, 5 years since I choked down dry turkey and swallowed the kind of comments that leave scars deeper than bruises. 5 years since Brooke announced her third pregnancy and Carol leaned over to whisper, "You still thinking of freezing your eggs?" While I nodded with a smile so tight it could crack a tooth. Back then, I left early and never went back. I moved cities, changed numbers, started seeing a therapist who didn't flinch when I said family is a trigger word. And still, there I was, standing in the kitchen, invitation in hand, phone in the other, dialing the number I swore I deleted. When Carol answered, I could hear Fox News blaring in the background and the clinking of wine glasses already being set out. "Maggie," she said, like nothing had happened. "We were hoping you'd call. Brooke and the kids will be so thrilled to see you." It wasn't a question. It never is with Carol. It was a script, and I was already being assigned my lines. I agreed to come, which surprised even me. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe it was loneliness. Or maybe I just wanted to see if they'd changed, if 5 years meant anything to people who seemed frozen in time. The drive took 4 hours, through highways lined with dead trees and roadside signs for antique malls and churches advertising pumpkin pie bake-offs. Somewhere around exit 32, I almost turned around. But I didn't. I just gripped the wheel tighter, counted silos, and reminded myself I didn't owe them grace, but I might owe myself a final goodbye. The moment I hit the old neighborhood, the air shifted, not literally, but emotionally, like something heavy landed in the back seat and wouldn't shut up. The same cracked sidewalks, the same oak tree in front of Carol's, now half dead and hanging over like a reminder that nothing really thrives there. I parked across the street, engine still running, just staring at the house. And that's when I saw it, the car. Not Brooke's SUV. Not Tony's rusted truck. This one was black, sleek, with plates from Maryland. Something about it pulled at my memory like a loose thread, but I couldn't place it. And I hated that. I like knowing what I'm walking into. But the thing about families like mine, they're experts at ambush. I killed the engine, stepped out, and let the cold slap me. Carol had gone full Pinterest again. Fake pumpkins, plaid ribbons, a chalkboard sign by the front door that said "Gather and give thanks." I stood there a second too long, staring at it, thinking about how much of my life I spent gathering and giving, just never receiving. She opened the door before I could knock. "Maggie, you're here early." Her voice had that sing-song cheer that makes your skin crawl when you know it's fake. She pulled me into a hug that smelled like too much perfume and dry shampoo. Her hair was sprayed into the same helmet it had been since '98, and her sweater had glittery leaves on it, as if being festive could make her likable. I stepped inside, and it hit me all at once. The heat, the overcooked stuffing smell, the sound of kids screaming from the basement. Brooke's voice echoed from the kitchen, talking too loud, probably about herself. Nothing had changed. Time didn't move in this house. It just hardened. Carol offered me wine before taking my coat, which told me everything I needed to know. She never offered anything unless she was nervous. She walked me into the living room where Brooke stood, glass in hand, wearing one of those athleisure outfits that costs $300 to look like you jogged here. Look who crawled out of her city cave. Brooke smirked, hugging me with one arm. I could already hear the little digs in her voice, the way she needed to win every interaction by drawing first blood. We made small talk. By small, I mean I mostly nodded while she told me about her new Pilates instructor, her husband's latest promotion, and how exhausting it is to juggle 3 kids and an online candle business. I asked her what scent her candles were. She said resilience, and I nearly laughed in her face. Somewhere between the cranberry sauce and Carol's lecture on how kids today don't respect tradition, I looked around and saw faces I hadn't seen in years, most unchanged, just more tired, more wrinkled, more drunk. I caught my reflection in the glass of the curio cabinet and barely recognized myself. Not because I'd changed so much, but because it was the first time I'd seen myself in this house as an outsider. And it fit. Later, I stepped out to get some air and glanced again at that black car. Still there. Still unfamiliar. A slow anxiety crept in, not fear, but something close, like that feeling when you walk into a room and forget what you came for, but you know it mattered. Someone else was here. Someone unexpected. Someone I hadn't planned for. I walked back toward the door, heart thudding louder than I wanted to admit. Because the thing is, in this family, the past doesn't knock. It just walks right in. By the time we all made it to the table, the tension in the air had already gone from awkward to borderline unbearable, like static before a thunderstorm, that charged silence everyone pretends not to notice, but feels in their teeth. Brooke had clearly started drinking before I arrived, her cheeks flushed, voice louder than usual, and her laugh echoing in a way that made your skin crawl with second-hand embarrassment. She had a wine glass clutched in her hand like it was her sword and shield, waving it around between stories about their new house renovation, how their kitchen now had imported marble from some part of Italy I can't pronounce, and the kids' latest achievements. Like how her oldest got into the accelerated gifted STEM program, whatever the hell that meant. I sat down slowly, across from her but angled just enough to make it feel like we weren't exactly facing off. Carol had gone all out on the table decorations, miniature pumpkins, little golden turkeys, even cloth napkins folded into leaves like this was the cover shoot for some Better Homes and Garden spread. It was all so perfectly fake it nearly made me laugh. Everything carefully arranged, just like this family, presentation over honesty, aesthetics over truth, tradition over healing. Uncle Tony was already halfway into his second beer and trying to explain something about gas mileage that no one asked about, while Mom nervously kept adjusting the salt shaker as if that was the only thing she could control in the moment. Brooke's husband, Alan, sat beside her, nodding and smiling in that detached way husbands do when they've long since learned to stay quiet to keep the peace. Their 3 kids, spaced out in age and temperament, sat like ticking time bombs with sugar highs, one picking at her food, one playing under the table, and one very clearly watching something underhanded on a phone he thought no one saw. Then, just as Carol passed the sweet potatoes, she leaned toward me with that same tight smile she always wore when she wanted to strike without leaving a visible bruise. Her voice was light, sweetened by faux curiosity, but laced with sharpened intent. "Your sister's doing so well. When will you grow up?" She said it like she was asking the weather forecast. Just dropped it on the table between the mashed potatoes and the cranberry sauce like it was nothing, like it wasn't a loaded missile dressed up in family concern. The room fell into a weird hush, not silent, but quieter. Forks paused, conversations dipped, glasses lowered. Brooke smirked, but didn't say a word, and I swear Alan looked away like he was trying to disappear into his wine glass. I didn't react at first. I took a sip of my water, because wine would have made me say something worse, and slowly set my glass down. Then I smiled. Not the kind of smile you give in photos or at weddings, but the kind of smile that means, I'm done pretending. I looked Carol dead in the eye and said, calmly, clearly, I did. That's why I stopped coming to these things. The words didn't explode, they sliced. Quietly. Precisely. Carol's fork froze midair. Brooke's eyes narrowed, not angry yet, but surprised, like she hadn't expected me to fight back, like the dog that finally bit after years of being kicked. No one spoke for a second too long, and I swear you could hear the faintest clink as the tension settled back into the room like dust. Mom tried to laugh it off, bless her. said something about the turkey getting cold, and asked if we wanted more rolls. Uncle Tony cleared his throat and pointed out, completely unrelated, that traffic on I-95 had been a nightmare lately. And just like that, the moment passed, or at least they pretended it did. There were 12 of us at the table: me, Mom, Aunt Carol, Brooke's husband, their 3 kids, Uncle Tony, and my cousin Daniel. So that's like 11? I said that out loud, sort of to myself, and no one corrected me. Maybe they didn't catch it, or maybe they were too focused on their own counting. Either way, it hung there, a stupid math mistake that no one touched, and it bugged me more than it should have. After dinner, I wandered through the house like a ghost revisiting a haunted place. The upstairs hallway still had that hideous wallpaper Carol insisted was vintage, even though it looked like a crime scene from the 70s. I made my way to the guest bedroom, the one I always hated: small, cold, decorated with dusty figurines and porcelain dolls that stared at you like they knew something you didn't. I tossed my bag on the bed and sat for a moment, trying to breathe through the heavy silence of a house that still smelled like childhood and disappointment. Then, when I reached down to grab a sweater from my bag, I noticed something sticking out from under the bed. A corner of a notebook, old, faded, bound in that cheap faux leather we all used in high school. I pulled it out. It was a journal. Brooke's handwriting was unmistakable, the same loopy, overly stylized letters she'd always used to sign her name in pink gel pen on everything from bathroom mirrors to yearbooks. The first few pages were boring lists, doodles, to-do notes. But then I flipped further and saw my name. Page after page, my name. Not just casual mentions, full paragraphs about me. Thoughts, feelings, confessions. I didn't want to keep reading. But of course, I did. I sat on the edge of that narrow twin bed with the journal resting in my lap like something alive, something that shouldn't have been touched, as if Brooke's handwriting had weight to it, like ink that could rot through paper if you stared too long. The room was colder than it should have been, the kind of chill that lives in houses built on secrets and bad memories. I pulled the sweater tighter around my shoulders and flipped to the first full page with my name. It started with jealousy, plain and sharp as a knife on tile. Dad always looked at her like she was something magic. She didn't even try, and she had him wrapped around her little finger. The year at the top was 2002. We were in high school. I remembered that winter because it snowed early and Dad taught me how to drive on ice in the empty mall parking lot. I remember laughing, spinning in circles while Brooke sulked at home because she wasn't invited. I never thought anything of it, just thought she didn't like driving. I never realized it was envy. That every moment I shared with him carved something out of her. I turned the page. Her writing got more frantic, the kind of looping scrawl people use when they're angry but don't want to admit it out loud. Maggie makes it so easy for people to love her, and I hate that. She doesn't even realize what it's like being second to someone who doesn't even notice she's first. I don't know how long I sat there reading, my fingers turning pages like I didn't need air or sleep anymore, like the journal had become oxygen and poison all at once. I found another entry from the year after our dad died, 2005, when I was in college and Brooke was back home, doing God knows what with her life and her friends who wore matching North Face jackets and judged people with their eyes before they spoke a word. And then I hit it. The page that changed everything. The page that flipped my stomach like spoiled milk. I told Carol that Maggie was losing it. I said she'd been saying weird things, crying out of nowhere, skipping class. She wasn't. But I needed someone to notice me. I didn't think they'd actually send her away. My breath caught in my throat, sharp and sudden like someone had punched me through time. I sat back, staring at those words that were clearly her own confession. She'd lied. Brooke had actually told Aunt Carol, and probably my mom, that I was unstable, that I was spiraling, that I needed help. And they believed her because of course they did. Brooke, the golden child, always polished and smiling, always spinning stories with the confidence of someone who's never faced real consequence. That lie had cost me everything. I remembered the therapy center, cold white walls, staff who treated you like a number, not a person. I remembered trying to explain that I wasn't depressed. Not really, I was just grieving our father in my own damn way. And they told me grief looks different on everyone, which was true, but I wasn't unwell, not then. I became unwell after being pulled out of school, after losing a scholarship, after friends stopped calling and professors stopped caring, and the version of my life I was building collapsed like wet cardboard. I could feel that familiar ache in my chest again, but I swallowed it down like bad wine and forced myself to close the journal before I started screaming. My fingers were trembling, but my face stayed calm. I've had years of practice. Brooke's been teaching me how to wear a mask since we were 12. Downstairs, I heard the buzz of voices and clinking glasses and someone laughing too loud, probably Tony telling one of his stories about lawnmower accidents or bar fights from the 80s that no one asked to hear again. I stood up slowly, smoothed my shirt, and carried the journal with me, sliding it into my purse as easily as if it had always been mine. When I came back down, I smiled like I'd just stepped out of a spa. Carol looked at me with those sharp eyes that never miss a damn thing, but she didn't say a word. Maybe she saw the edge in my smile, or maybe she was too distracted refilling Brooke's wine for the third time this evening. Either way, I slipped back into the conversation like a ghost with unfinished business. I didn't say anything about the journal. Not yet. Instead, I sat beside Alan and asked him how work was going, listened politely while he explained something about tax restructuring or strategic development or whatever made men in polos feel accomplished. Brooke was glowing under all the attention, throwing her head back when she laughed, touching Carol's hand when she made a point, reminding everyone, in her own subtle, rehearsed way, that she was the center of the family's solar system and we were all just lucky to orbit near her. I raised my glass of wine and let myself nod along, let myself exist there, just under the surface, quiet and still and dangerous in a way no one suspected. Because once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. And once you realize someone tried to ruin you just so they could shine brighter, something in you goes very still. Not broken, just cold. So when I stood up an hour later, maybe closer to dessert than dinner, and clinked my fork against the rim of my glass, no one expected it. Not Mom. Not Tony. Not even Brooke, who had leaned in to say something about pumpkin pie when I interrupted her with a raised hand and said, "I'd like to make a toast." And just like that, the room went quiet again. The air thickened. Forks hovered. Glasses froze mid-motion. Because they all knew, somewhere in their gut, that I wasn't the same Maggie they remembered. And I wasn't planning to play nice anymore. The glass made a sharp, clean sound when I tapped my fork against it, just loud enough to cut through the hum of conversation, that manufactured cheer that families like ours polish and wear like a badge. The clinking echoed once, then silence took the room like a curtain dropping in a dark theater, and all eyes turned toward me. Some curious, some confused, and a few, like Brooke's, already laced with dread. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. There's a certain weight that comes with quiet confidence, and I wore it like armor that night. "I know it's not really my place," I began, and the irony almost made me laugh. The idea that anything in this house was ever my place had always been a joke, though no one had ever dared to say it out loud. But it's been a long time since I've been at this table, and I just wanted to say a few words before dessert. I saw Carol shift slightly in her chair, her hands folding tighter in her lap, while Tony leaned back like he knew something was coming, but wasn't sure if he wanted to see it unfold. I smiled, soft and warm on the outside, sharp and deliberate beneath. "I want to thank all of you," I continued, scanning the faces that had never truly seen me. "I want to thank you for keeping things exactly the same." A few chuckles, nervous ones, rose from the table like steam from a pot about to boil, but no one dared interrupt. Because coming back here, it hit me how lucky I've been to grow up around such consistency. I let the silence stretch, just long enough to be uncomfortable, then lifted my glass. To Aunt Carol, who always knew exactly how to correct a person, even when they weren't asking for advice. Your commitment to tradition, no matter how outdated or damaging, has been inspiring." Her mouth twitched, unsure whether to take it as praise or insult, and that hesitation told me she knew, deep down, exactly what I meant. To Uncle Tony, I went on, nodding his way, for always teaching us that being the loudest in the room doesn't necessarily mean you're the one with something to say. He gave a short grunt that might have been a laugh, might have been offense, but either way, he didn't stop me. "And to my mother," I added, turning just slightly toward her, "for showing me how silence can be louder than screaming, and that love, when conditional, teaches you how to walk on eggshells with ballet slippers." My mother's face barely moved, but her fingers tightened on her wine glass like it might shatter if she didn't anchor herself to it. Then, finally, I turned to Brooke. I took a breath before speaking, and for a moment, she looked at me like she'd swallowed a stone. "And Brooke," I said slowly, "thank you, most of all, for teaching me about envy." Her jaw tensed, but she said nothing. "You taught me that image matters more than truth, that performance is everything, and that some people need to dim every light around them just to feel like they shine." The kids had stopped moving. Alan had gone stiff beside her, trying to avoid eye contact with anyone. Carol's smile was gone now, replaced with a tight line of confusion and disapproval, the kind she used on grocery store cashiers who didn't bag things in the right order. I raised my glass just a little higher. "And I'm so happy you're all exactly the same," I said, each word landing like a pin on the hardwood floor. "Because now I know it was never me." That was the moment the room didn't explode, it simply collapsed inward. No one shouted. No one stood. There was just the quiet clatter of one fork falling, a soft gasp from the far end of the table, and the strange, still silence of people realizing something irreversible had just happened. Carol opened her mouth as if to speak, but closed it again. Brooke stared at me like I'd burned down her house. And Mom, bless her, looked more like someone realizing she forgot to lock a door 20 years ago, and now the whole damn place was ransacked. I set my glass down, still mostly full, and left the room without looking back. I didn't need to see their faces again. I'd memorized them. I walked down the hall, past the family portraits that never included me, past the cabinet full of crystal no one used unless guests were over, and into the bathroom that smelled like lilac soap and denial. I locked the door and exhaled, leaning against the sink, gripping its edges like a ledge. My heart was steady, not calm, but steady, like something had finally clicked into place after years of grinding wrong. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just stood there, letting the moment sink in like medicine you're not sure is working. Then came the knock. Soft, hesitant, like someone unsure if they wanted an answer. "Maggie?" Brooke's voice. Not sharp, not smug, just small. "Can I come in?" I paused. That wasn't the voice she used in front of other people. That wasn't the voice of someone ready to fight. "I need to talk to you," she said. Her words broke a little, and I realized then that she wasn't angry. She was crying. I opened the bathroom door slowly, half expecting Brooke to have already walked away, half hoping maybe she had. But she stood there, still in her high heels that never quite touched the floor when she walked, still in that too-perfect sweater that probably cost more than my entire outfit, but this time she looked small in it, like a kid playing dress-up in adult shame. Her eyes were red around the rims, not puffy yet but getting there, the kind of raw honesty you don't usually get from her unless no one else is watching. We stared at each other for a long moment without speaking, the way people do when they're either about to say something they'll regret or finally tell the truth. She didn't make a move to come in, and I didn't step aside to invite her either. Instead, I just leaned against the sink, arms crossed, and said quietly, "So? What is it?" Brooke glanced down the hallway, making sure no one was in earshot, like Carol or Mom might come around the corner and catch her being vulnerable. Then she looked back at me, and her voice, when it came out, was shaky but clearer than I expected. "You weren't wrong," she said. "About what you said in the toast." I didn't reply. I wanted her to keep talking, to finally be the one forced to fill the silence. I told them, she continued, voice barely above a whisper. Back then, when you were in school, I told Aunt Carol and Mom that you were struggling, that you were depressed, skipping classes, saying weird stuff. And you weren't. You weren't doing any of that. It landed like a slow punch to the stomach, the kind of hit that doesn't knock you down right away, but takes your breath and lets you stand there stunned with the air gone from your lungs. I already knew. The journal had told me. But hearing her say it out loud twisted something inside me. Why? I asked, and the question came out flatter than I meant it to. Not angry. Not tearful. Just tired. Brooke blinked hard, swallowed, and leaned against the wall across from me, arms folded like mine. Because, she said, you were always more. You were smarter, and Dad loved you more, and I could feel it. Even if he didn't say it, I could feel it. And I knew when he was gone, there'd be nothing left to balance it out. I didn't want to be the boring one, the second one. So I made you look worse. That's all. I didn't know they'd send you somewhere. I just wanted them to stop talking about how worried they were for me and start worrying about you. There was a pause that felt like it could last years. I wasn't even doing it out of malice, she added. Not really. It was fear. It was like, if they didn't see you as the problem, then I was just the extra one, the one who didn't matter. I looked at her, my sister, the person I'd shared bunk beds with and birthday cakes and hand-me-down arguments that never quite ended. And, for the first time, I saw the truth. Not the one I'd crafted to survive, not the one she told herself to cope, but the raw, ugly thing sitting in the middle of us like a ghost that had been whispering all these years. I lost everything, I said, my voice still even. That lie ruined my degree. My friends didn't believe me. I missed job opportunities because I had that breakdown label trailing behind me like a damn tail. And it wasn't true. Brooke nodded. I know. What do you want me to do with this now? I asked. She looked up at me, eyes wet, lip trembling just enough to break whatever wall she'd built over the years. But she didn't answer. Not then. She just stood there like a child caught stealing from a cookie jar, except the cookie was someone else's life. We didn't say anything else. We didn't hug or cry together or promise to start over. She didn't apologize, not in words. And I didn't forgive her, not in that moment. There are some things that don't fit into apologies, things too tangled to pull free in one night. The next morning, I packed my bag before anyone else was awake. The house was quiet, steeped in that weird post-holiday hangover where the scent of food turns from comforting to suffocating, and every corner feels like it's coated in invisible dust. I left the guest room as it was, didn't make the bed, didn't leave a note for Carol or a smile for Mom. Before I got in my car, I took one last look at Brooke's sleek black SUV parked crooked in the driveway. The morning frost was thin on the windshield. I pulled a scrap of paper from my coat pocket, the one I'd torn from the journal I never returned, and left it tucked beneath her wiper blade. You can have them. I don't need any of this anymore. The drive out of town was quieter than the drive in. I didn't play music. Didn't stop for coffee. I just watched the road unwind in front of me like a rope I didn't need to grip anymore. And as I crossed the county line, my phone buzzed in the console. A voicemail. From a number that hadn't called in years. It was Dad. A recording, an old message I'd saved a lifetime ago and forgotten. His voice was warm, slightly tired, filled with the kind of affection that doesn't need explaining. Mags, don't let M get to you. You're the only one in that damn family who sees straight. I pulled over not because I needed to cry, but because I wanted to hear it again. That voice. That truth. That thread of something real. The truth was out now. But it didn't set anyone free. Not really. Not yet. I may have won my revenge. But what did it cost? And what would you have done?